Hello and welcome to the first episode of Last Week I've Learned About podcast. I'm Tudor and I will be your host. This podcast is all about sharing the things I read and found out the previous week, trying to cover multiple topics like technology, business, psychology, education, sports, travel, physics, health, entrepreneurship and more. Each episode will contain mostly one main topic, and after that with time I'll try to extend it to 3 or more, but this will depend on how broad each of them is. So each episode will be approximately 10 to 20 minutes long, depending on the topic again, and it is ideal for those of you who want to listen to a podcast while commuting between home and office, while going in a bus, while biking, while doing your usual routines. I don't know, every time you have 10 minutes when you can listen to this. Personally, I'm very interested in a lot of domains and topics, and I think that the podcast is a better format to share this kind of facts and data than waiting for the next quiz night at a pub. Also, I'm running this podcast as an experiment for myself, in which I want to change some routines and habits, especially those kind of procrastination and laziness, into something more productive and healthy for my mind and body. I will try to be as detailed as possible for those of you who are really into this kind of changes, so I will keep you updated with what's going on. This was the intro. Let's get started. The main topic for this week will be about habits. My interest in the subject was triggered by a super interesting book called The Power of Habit, written by Charles Duhigg. And throughout the book, the author is describing how the brain forms habits and how they can be changed, but also he shows us how the science evolved from the early 50s and 60s, when this was just starting, until today, where the neuroscience, it's a very established science. Okay, so what exactly is a habit? Scientists says that the habits emerge because the brain is constantly looking for ways to save effort. So if we like it or not, our brain is pretty lazy and it chooses to create apps that will work in the background for us for later use. So we can notice them in everyday life, from the way we are putting our shoes when we are leaving the house. If we put the left one first and tie it, and after that the right one and tie it and after go, or vice versa, or completely different way. We can notice them when we are eating. After we are finishing eating, if we put the dishes back in the sink or we leave them on the table. We can notice them at the office, when the first moment when we get there, we are checking the emails, or we are going to have a coffee with some colleagues and to discuss. So this is pretty much the habits. They are everywhere around us, and it's in most of our daily routines. Okay, so for me, after reading this book, I started to take note of my habits and my routines, and I've noticed a weird one that I started like 4 years ago, and it is that I'm unable to eat alone if I'm not watching something. Like every time I eat alone, I have to watch something on YouTube or on Netflix, or to read something on Reddit. So this is something that was developed because in the dorm we used to cook and to watch something, and it was kind of a socializing. And right now my brain is like this. Every time when I have to eat alone and I don't have something to watch, my brain is like, okay, what do we do now? What's happening? We just focus on eating? I really don't know. How does a habit work? It is a 3-step loop. The first step is that there's a trigger that tells your brain to go into automatic mode and which habit to use. After that, it goes to the second step, that is the routine, which can be physical or mental or emotional or whatever you developed. And the third step is the reward, which helps our brain to figure out if this loop is worth remembering for later or not. So to be easier to understand, let's take the example of a monkey that's in the room, and that room has a light and a button. Okay, when the light will turn on, the monkey will have to press the button and it will receive a sweet treat, let's say a banana or an apple, something like this. In the first tries, like 10 to 20, the monkey's brain will try to make a connection between the light and what happens after she presses the button in order to get the sweet treat. So after that, exactly from the moment the lights turn on, she presses the button and she receives the sweet treat. This means that she already knows that her brain knows that the trigger is the light. That means that she will receive a treat if she presses the button. So this thing is so important because also this monkey can get angry if she doesn't get the reward that she thinks she deserves because she does this routine. So from this point of view, in a very small scale, our brain is still primitive, and especially in these parts of how we are building our habits. And the problem is that our brain cannot tell the difference between a bad and a good habit. So yeah, if you had the chance to acquire some bad ones, they will be there waiting for you in the background, waiting for the right triggers and the right rewards. So all these habits are so powerful because they create neurological cravings. After a certain point, you start to crave to do something in order to receive the reward that you think you deserve. So this is their dangerous part. Also, after that, there's the next big question. Can we change a habit? Well, the author is telling about the golden rule of habit change. So if you keep the same trigger and the same reward, a new routine can be inserted. For this to work, we really need to identify all these steps. You can take a piece of paper and a pen and to write them down. Why do I do certain things? So, let's say, why do I need to check the social media so often in a day? Is it because I don't want to lose any information? Is it because I don't want to be unavailable for someone who needs my help? How do I feel after checking it? Am I up to date with what everyone in my circle is doing or showing? Do I know the latest news and memes? So all these questions are helping. These kind of questions are helping us to put all these habits in a picture, to say, okay, if this is my trigger, then how can I change my routine in order to receive the same reward? Now, if you're interested in finding more in this topic and you want to discover your habits or to change them, you can find more by reading the book. It's called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. And he describes all these processes of how you can overcome your habits and everything about this scientific part. So you can find the book in the physical bookshops, on Amazon. There's a Kindle edition and there's audio. So feel free to search for it wherever you want and be sure to read it if you're really, really interested in this. Yeah, my interest in psychology and neurology started when I was doing training sessions and projects with kids and students. So it always was something that I really, really liked and I really wanted to know more about. So I'm very, very happy that I was able to find this book now, even though it appeared a few years ago. And especially that I think now I'm more able to understand what it was about than the previous years. This was this week's episode. You can find this episode on Anchor.fm, on Spotify and YouTube for now, and it will be available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Castbox, Overcast, Tunnelin, and the other podcast platform later this week. For more questions, recommendations, discussions, and other things, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Tudor Pteancu, written together without any punctuation between the first name and last name. So this was all for today. See you next week.